I think we can get started.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Emily Williams-Knight here, President and CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association, and my colleague,
Kelsey Erickson Streufert, Chief Public Affairs Officer for the Texas Restaurant Association.
We're really happy to be here with all of you today. We're down in Austin as we kick off the 88th legislative session. Obviously, always an important time for the restaurant industry. As a reminder, we're about $73 billion in revenue here in Texas, about 1.3 million employees, and we now have 53,000 plus locations for food service and restaurants across the state. So just an incredible powerhouse of an industry, and the second largest private employer at almost 11% of our state's employment. I think a couple things as we go through our agenda. I think most importantly, what we're very proud of is that this agenda for this session was an incredible collaboration between our chapters across the state, between those restaurants within those chapters, and of course with elected officials. And so over this last year, Kelsey and I traveled to all 23 chapters. We met with restaurant operators. We met with, in some cases, even employees, as well as the local officials and even the state representation to talk about what was happening, how was the recovery going in the pandemic, and what could we, as the voice of the industry, bring back to our state's capital in the form of either proposed legislation or looking for ways to modify even other bills that people are proposing. And so what we're going to walk through for you is sort of what our priorities are, both short-term and long-term. And I would really add this, a common theme, no matter where we traveled in the state, was just really the exorbitant cost increases. So you have rent that's up significantly for restaurant operators. You have the cost of food, which I think we just saw is now at almost 15.2% producer price increase year over year. And the third is around hourly wages, which is up about 21% year over year. So we know anything that we do needs to be on both the short term and how can we help to find relief for this industry in the short term, and then long term, how do we make sure that we have a sustainable industry in Texas, but also that we have employees that are well cared for and can thrive in this industry and build a career. So Kelsey, I'll turn it over to you to start.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Emily touched on one of the themes. It's really both immediate relief and long-term sustainability. The second theme that I would highlight is we really looked at what is going to help the entire industry. Emily mentioned we have 53,000 plus locations across the state. That's everything from food trucks, coffee shops, bagel shops, donut shops, all the way up to some of the largest brands that we all know and love, franchise groups, caterers. We really made it a point to look for policies that would impact the entire industry in a really positive way. So as Emily said, kind of looking at that first bucket of immediate relief, we've got several priorities. One is regulatory consistency. Many forget that restaurants are one of the most highly regulated industries, I think, in the world. They're regulated at a city, county, state, and federal level many times. And that's good. We need regulations. We need to make sure food is safe and workplaces are safe, but we also need to make sure that there isn't a confusing patchwork, that those regulations are clear, they're predictable, they're fair, and there's some consistency across the state. So if I'm a restaurant operator operating in one city, I have a reasonable ability to predict and understand what the rules are there and in neighboring cities. 254 counties across the state, thousands of cities, really important we have a handle on what those regulations are and that they're pro-growth, they make sense, they protect the public while at the same time allowing our small businesses to thrive. So that's the first. And the second is swipe fee relief. Many are starting to learn about swipe fees or interchange fees, as they're called. This is the fee that a restaurant or other business pays to the credit card processors and the banks when you or I use a credit or debit card for a transaction. The business pays a percentage of that to those card company and banks. Our challenge is that percentage is calculated on the whole bill, including any sales or alcohol or hotel taxes that a business is required by law to collect. So we would like the legislature to take a look at that. Businesses obviously have no choice. They are required to collect taxes on behalf of the state and local government. And so we want to make sure that they're not being essentially penalized with additional fees for that mandate.
Paying a fee on top for the tax that they have to then return to either the city or the state.
Exactly. A third in that immediate relief category is property taxes. This is a theme for the entire legislature. There's this session. We're excited to hear that. We know there's a lot of movement around homeowner property tax relief, which is great. Our employees, our customers need that. But we want to make sure that businesses, and particularly small businesses, are not left out of that equation, because many, many restaurants are facing, as Emily said, skyrocketing rents, skyrocketing property tax bills, and that can literally price out some of our most historic, beloved businesses in cities like Austin and Dallas. So property tax relief is going to be key this session. And then related to that is what we're calling economic growth. Our state leaders are very proud of the fact that we have a $32.7 billion state surplus this year. That's amazing. It's wonderful. Our point on this is simply that that surplus is a direct result of our strong economy. And so we need to reinvest a significant portion of that money back into our economy so that it stays strong and we have that economic engine moving forward. That can take a lot of different forms. Things like infrastructure, things like some of the topics Emily's going to get into in terms of long-term sustainability. But it's really about making sure that our businesses can continue to thrive and really power that economic engine of Texas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Emily for more of our long-term priorities.
Excellent. I think first and foremost, it's around the workforce. We talk about this all the time, is really how do we sustain the workforce? If we're 51% of the food dollar in the state of Texas, we know that without us being strong and being able to employ and have those personnel that are either certified or trained to be in those jobs, that we're going to run into a situation where we'll have growing food deserts and lots of other issues across the state as big as 30 plus million people. So first and foremost, we are going with a sort of bipartisan ask to secure additional investment into our ProStart program. We know we have currently about 215 high schools and about 25,000 students that are learning through a curriculum to come into our industry certified, ready to go to work and build a career. We want to really make sure that every high school that wants to have that program has the resources to do that. And so I think I'm really proud of actually how this bill has come together. And it's really our way to say, let's give those students an opportunity to get the skills they need in high school and go on. They may choose to go to college, but at the same time, they'll be ready to work in our industry. And we feel very strongly about that because the outcomes from that program are so incredibly strong. The second thing is really around employee well-being. It's really health and well-being. And that comes in a couple forms, and a lot of it's tied to affordability. A personal, I think, for both of us is, what are we going to do about childcare? I've joined a coalition here in Texas. We feel very strongly with the makeup of our industry that we have got to find a way to bring affordable childcare to our industry, both access as well as cost. And so that's going to be something that we are partnering with other organizations to figure out how do we solve that problem going forward and make it so people don't have to choose to be home or to work for us. And then also with that is around healthcare. We actually recently did a partnership where we can bring telehealth, essentially teledoc, to an employee and their entire family that for less than $10 a month. We're working really hard on solutions like that and looking at the legislature to see where there may be red tape that we can remove to make these options that our employers, our members can bring to their employees. From a sort of holistic standpoint from the Texas Restaurant Association, our incoming board chair for this year has actually chosen affordable and accessible childcare and employee health and well-being as the two drivers of his platform agenda. And so we're excited about the work happening there and how we can make an impact to not only ensure we have healthy, long-serving, financially successful restaurants, but also that those employees that deliver that service are well cared for and have that support that they need for them and their families. Also, food security. You know, we really realized in the pandemic here in Texas that we have a much bigger role that we are able to play when it comes to food security in our state. We have food deserts in some cases, and we have places where there may not be a grocery store, but there is a restaurant. So how can we plug the restaurants in this state in a more formal way, whether it be through programs with our local food banks, whether it be us working not only here, but also back in Washington, like we already have started, around including restaurants in the SNAP benefit program, right? Take some pressure off of the system and insert one of the largest infrastructures for food delivery in the state that will only benefit the state, but also our citizens, which we think is critically important. And I think last is access to capital. You know, we are not naive. We talk to our restaurant members every day, and it's really clear that many of them have kicked some of these costs, some of these debts down, you know, as far as they could. And now with the IDA loan initial payments coming due and the ability now coming out of the pandemic, maybe essentially to innovate and to invest, the cost of capital is pretty extensive. And so what can we do to make sure that our restaurants have that affordability with interest rates going sky high to still be able to make those investments into their small businesses? You know, one of the things I'd like to remind people is that we often think that the restaurant industry is made up of just large conglomerates. And that's actually not true, especially here in Texas. 9 out of 10 restaurants have fewer than 50 employees, and 7 in 10 are single unit small business owners. And so we're very focused on those small business issues this session, and really excited about the goodwill that we have brought forward through all of our travels, all of our networking, and really listening to our owners and their employees about what matters most.
That's exactly right. So with that said, we'll open it up if there are any questions. Just use the raise your hand feature or drop a question in the chat if you can't use internet. Mike Board, it looks like you're up. If you want to unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you guys for doing this. I appreciate it. You were speaking about property taxes, how it relates to businesses, and that seems to be a huge issue that's going to be coming up this legislative session. Can you give me sort of an idea about what some restaurant owners and restaurant companies are facing with their property right now, with their property tax? Are they being told that it's going up a lot? What's the situation with property and property taxes right now with restaurants?
Absolutely. It's a huge challenge. You know, Texas's growth and Texas's popularity is both our strength and our biggest challenge in many respects. There was data that came out recently about just how many small businesses, not only restaurants, but restaurants are unfortunately a leading indicator, how many small businesses across the state and in Texas cannot pay their rent right now. It's over 50%. It's staggering. And property taxes are a big piece of that. And it's probably the biggest lever that the state legislature can control, right? So we need property tax relief, especially for small and historic businesses. I think there's a lot of forms that can take. There's a lot of interest in what's called buying down the property tax rate. So essentially, the state paying part of that bill instead of passing it down to the locals and the property owners. That would certainly help. I think the legislature needs to look at longer term solutions like appraisal relief, right? Especially we're sitting in Austin right now, probably has one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. And I've talked to business owners who have seen their property tax bills double or triple every single year. And that is completely unsustainable, especially in our more urban areas. The value of the land, because it could be redeveloped into a much bigger property, a much denser property, is worth far more than the business. And so how do you create an appraisal system that is fair and equitable and considers those small businesses and the role they play in the community? So from our perspective, lots of options on the table, lots of ways to help with this problem, but it's imperative that the legislature consider small and historic businesses as part of the solution.
That's right.
All right, looks like anyone else? And if y'all could identify yourself, who you're speaking from too, that would be
Claire
great.
with Dallas Morning News.
Claire. Claire, do you want to see if you're unmuted?
There she goes.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Hi, guys. Claire Ballard with the Dallas Morning News. Do you have any specifics that you can give for solutions that you're looking at to address the childcare issue that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah, so we're diving into this, and we realize that it's not unique to restaurants. And so I've joined a coalition actually that is looking at lots of different options, right? Is there an opportunity like some states like Georgia, North Carolina, where the state has leaned in to create more affordable solutions and allowed the private market to come in a more meaningful way, which we don't have here in Texas today? It's looking at some of the subsidies that are both for increasing the number of childhood educators and that path to being able to actually work and get a license to have a childcare center. And then it's also looking at some of that as potentially some of this surplus as a way to allow for more of these city and local governments to create childcare solutions. For us, the math and a majority of our industry is for line employees. The math doesn't work with what the cost of childcare has become. And so if we're asking someone to put their 2 children into childcare at X number of dollars an hour, and they're earning, even with the incredible wage increases we've experienced in our sector, the math makes that a choice that's not tenable for their family. And so it's both increasing access, it's increasing the number of individuals that are licensed to operate a center. And it's right now looking at increasing, how do we get those teachers in that really, 0 to 3, 0 to 4 range that can be employed in this industry, because they too suffer from, in some cases, they can't get them out of school fast enough in order to get the certifications to actually run the center. And so I think what I love about this is a very bipartisan group. It's from every industry. Went on a listening tour the last 6 months to talk about really how bad this is, especially in some of our rural areas. And now going back and working with the Workforce Commission and other organizations to think about what are those creative solutions. And honestly, Claire, our job right now is to make sure that we bring huge awareness to this issue. And as it relates to us, we have a majority of women in our industry. And so we really have to make sure we figure this piece out. And we know that more than 1 million women are not back to work from the pandemic. And so how do we help solve this in a new creative way and make sure that all elected officials understand what the real challenge is when many of them at this point do not?
Yeah, we like to really emphasize childcare as an economic development issue at this point. And for our industry, one point that we have to be really cognizant of is it's not always a 9 to 5 traditional hours, which makes it even harder for our folks to find quality, affordable childcare. So I think, accessing and increasing the number of providers, as Emily said, funding, all going to be important things that we discussed this session.
And, it sounds like a one-off, but even some of the creativity we're seeing is the drive-throughs are now being managed by people at home. So when you drive up, you're actually speaking to someone sitting in their home, so they don't actually have to come to that restaurant. Some of that creativity will play itself out because they're such a critical part of our workforce. But I really do think this is time for us to broaden the understanding of what this means to Texas's growth and how we make sure that these children also get a great start to life and to education.
Any other questions? Give it a few more minutes here in case anyone thinks of a last. Oh, Claire again.
Hi, sorry, I could keep going with the questions.
No worries.
Do you guys have any figures that you can share on what you're seeing right now with regards to restaurants struggling with these debts and these loan payments that are starting back up? Like, are you seeing a lot of closures starting to happen because of that?
I think we know as an industry, we're always going to have a cycle because, it's a small business. So it plays that cycle out. This many open, this many close. I think if you were to anecdotally ask the two of us and our regional directors, we are seeing restaurants continue to close. And as they close, they're announcing that they just can't sustain the costs anymore. So it's not that their menu didn't work. It wasn't that they didn't have enough employees. It was just simply that they could no longer make the math work, right? The costs were they've held on for so long. And so we are still seeing that. Claire, we don't have an exact number, but I would say, as we've talked about as a team, we're hearing a lot of the legacy restaurants not be able to make that I guess, final turn, that are really have said like this, I just can't do this. The investments required in technology and third-party solutions with the costs of what it takes to run this place. I'm tired. It's been a long 3 years. I'm out. So we are seeing that. We are seeing in some cases, there's some restaurants, obviously a majority of restaurants here in Texas that are still thriving. We saw over November, December, a lot of consumers shift from buying goods, products to services. And we really saw that uptick in traffic. Unfortunately, what we don't talk enough about is the uptick in traffic and revenue does not always equal a better profit at the bottom. And those costs are really eating away. And so that's why we are really looking at solutions like, how do we make sure there aren't duplicative fees everywhere? How do we try to take the swipe fee out and reduce that to make sure it's fair to the restaurant? wherever we can create new legislation or new opportunities through relationships to really tackle the costs for our operators, knowing that it could be another 6 months before things start to even begin to come down at a meaningful level on the producer price side.
The other thing I'll say too is we are seeing a lot of businesses close a location. Maybe the rent or the taxes just got too high at that location and they're looking to either kind of downsize their space, maybe do more to go. So there's, I think businesses are definitely feeling the pressure. They continue to innovate, they continue to hold on, which is why we haven't seen more closures, but it's concerning when you look at the long-term outlook, because as Emily said, those costs are high and they're not immediately coming down.
Well, and one last point, not to elaborate this, but I think that also when we open a restaurant or close a restaurant, it has a direct economic impact to both that area, that city, that county, and of course the state. So for every dollar invested, $2.37 goes back to the Texas economy. We're a producer industry. And so I think as you see, and I just did an interview around downtown Dallas, ironically, and sort of talking about with all the empty office space, how are we going to get people down? How are we going to create new opportunities for rentals, condos, apartments? But then, of course, you have to feed those people. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like when maybe someone isn't willing to take that risk right now? I will say that right now it looks like the forecast is that we will increase about 2.5% new units in the state of Texas, which is higher, much higher than the national average, which is about flat. So we do know that companies and businesses are looking to expand into Texas, but I do think that those that have weathered the storm for so many years now, we're coming on March, it'll be 3 years. I think that's where you're going to see some of the pain continue.
Sahar, it looks like you've got your hand up.
Thank you. For some reason, it flashed the mute and unmute for a second and it went away.
Probably us.
Well, yeah, I'm Sahar. I'm a reporter with the Austin Business Journal. And I just wanted to know if there's a way that the state legislation can address the employment issue through immigration policies.
I wish.
Yeah, it's a federal issue, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really a federal issue. We've been very vocal about the need for immigration reform. We think, again, it's an economic development issue. President Biden was actually in El Paso Saturday
meeting with
and our past board chair and our El Paso chapter chair actually had the opportunity to meet with him and to sort of impress upon him how important this issue is for our industry in particular. We're an incredibly diverse industry. There's a reason we talk about the melting pot of America. It's because our culinary scene really represents that diversity, and we're very proud of it. And we need more workers. And there are a lot of people who want to come to this country, who want to follow the laws, who want to work, who want to pay taxes. And so we need to develop a common sense solution that addresses that need, that prioritizes security, safety, all of those issues. But unfortunately, we really need the federal government to step up and make that happen. But we will continue to make that one of our top federal priorities because it would be a huge help. Claire, your hand's still up. Did you have another question?
Sorry, no, I don't. Apologies.
No worries. Okay. We're all doing Zoom as best we can. Any other, anyone else? Last call for questions. We did record this video and we'll make it available. If you want it, just send us an email at media@txrestaurant.org. Alexandra, if you could drop that in the chat for everyone. We can also drop in the chat our full names and titles. Yes. All right. Anyone else? I'm not seeing anything. All right, I'm just gonna wait for Alexandra to finish putting our names and titles in the chats, and then we will sign off. Thank you all very much. We appreciate you being here on short notice. We're looking forward to a good session.